Today we'll be exploring Vaisakhi, the most well-known and celebrated festival in the Sikh calendar. We all know the common narrative, but in this episode we'll go beyond that with the help of J.S. Goodawal's Master of the White Hawk and have our questions answered by Dr. Kamleep Singh. Together we'll explore the events and timeline of Vaisakhi 1699. So join us today as we take a journey down the rabbit hole of written sources regarding Vaisakhi. Be sure to check out the other extracts or listen to the full podcast episode to find out more. We briefly discussed that there was an old initiation ceremony, which we'll briefly cover in a second, but basically it seems to be that this new initiation ceremony, the Khalsa initiation ceremony, according to Sainik, the institution of the Khalsa is Guru Gobind Singh Ji's life mission. Chopai Singh says that Guru Sahib introduces Kesada Paul even to impart a distinct identity to the Sikh Panth. Chopai Singh says 1697, not 99, but again, we'll get into the dates in a minute. Gaur Singh, interestingly, is the first pre-colonial text to mention the request of heads. After 3 calls, a Sikh steps forward who was taken into a tent where a male goat was slaughtered, and this is repeated 5 times. At which point, water is added to a vessel, upon which Bani is recited, and Mataji puts Patas in the water. If we follow Gaur Singh's account, right? Gaur Shish is kind of similar to Gaur Singh. You could argue he's probably read Gaur Singh's manuscript or heard about it, and perhaps just recounting that. But separately, it differs in that it wasn't Guru Gobind Singh Ji who slaughters the goats, but the individuals who come forward. Gaur Shish also adds that Jap Sahib, Japji Sahib, Sohaiya, Chope, and Anand are all recited, and so were 3 verses of Shastra Naman. What's interesting about that, just as a side note, is the fact that they're referencing Bani that's from Dasam Granth. So if Dasam Granth wasn't relevant, they wouldn't be referring to it, obviously, right? I know those accounts differ slightly, and everyone listening is probably like, oh my god, that's very, very different to the kind of the sanitized religious version we have of what happens at Vaisakhi 1699. But from your reading of Sikh history, what can you tell us about what happens and also when it happens?
Really good question. And the thing is, there's a lot of things in what you just said in that bite-sized bit of information.
Yeah.
So I want to break it down a little bit. First thing, let's go back to the original source, which is Sri Dasam Granth, as you've said.
Yep.
You've linked it into that narrative. So what does the master of the falcon, of the royal steed, Kalgidhar Maharaj, what does Guru Gobind Singh Sache Pasha, what does he say from his Siddhi Mukhvak, from his holy mouth? And he says, Thad piyo mein jor kar, bachan kaha se nyay, panchale tab jagt mein jab tum karo sahay. So in Vichitra Natak, that's a peak bit of that Bani, it reaches a crescendo. It reaches after Maharaj talks about his apni katha of what happened before, why he ended up here, and everything else that went on. Maharaj says, I stood before that divine mysterious being, Akal, and with my head down, I said, I can only create this Panth if you Sahai. Remember Sri Bhagavati Ji Sahai? If you protect me, if you assist me, if you're with me in Kaljug to create this Khalsa. So Maharaj is stating his purpose to create the Khalsa, as Senapat has rightly stated, that's his purpose, yeah? And then that goes into the whole mythology that people have to look at, where, Samundra ki Guru Tegh Bahadur in his past life is aiding Durga, and then he promises her a son. And then from his Shakti, Dushdaman is born, the Rishi. And then from the Rishi who's meditating Dushdaman, as he's meditating on a kal, on a skin, with his sa, with his breath, he creates these million Shanamikar lions, yeah, who go down and destroy the demon of Rakat Bij and drink the blood of that demon and destroy him. And then therefore they destroy that duality of the demon. And then the Khalsa in that mythology is the reincarnation of that same mission to destroy the dualistic being in Kaljug, or the duality of Kaljug, even on the psychic level, spiritual level, to make everything ik. Yeah? And so, the sword, Maharaj said, ik did the way spata hatsui. The sword is what makes 1 into 2, but the sword can also make 2 into 1 through the Shabad, yeah? That's why we take the initiation of the double-edged sword. It's a symbolic, right? And it all goes back to that mythology, yeah? And that mythology, why the people don't like it, because it's Indic.
Yeah.
And it goes back into this whole Indic worldview. But it's his own worldview in the Indic worldview. It's unique to itself. There isn't another worldview like that in India. And so please, my brothers who are against what I'm saying, also acknowledge what I'm saying there. There's some truth in what I'm saying. And so the thing is unique to itself because it's Niara, yeah? It's unique. And so the Khalsa is on that same mission of destroying evil.
Yep.
And Sukh Santa Karanan, Durmat Darnan, Kilpe Karanan, Asarnan, Jaya Jaya Jakaran, Sistyu Baram, Mampritparan Jaya Tekan. Maharaj says, I seek the shelter of the sword, which makes the saints happy, which destroys the evildoers, yeah? In the beginning, Sirikal Ji ki Ustad in Bachitra Natak. And so Maharaj sets out his purpose, yeah? Which is Taram Yuddha Ka Jai, I desire to have the holy war, or the war for good, to defeat evil, yeah? The duality, the oppression, the tyranny, the injustice. And so that is the purpose of the Khalsa. And that's why the Khalsa is a Kshatriya. Khalsa is not a passive sant. It's not Mahatma Gandhi, bless his soul. It's not somebody in the loincloth. It's somebody who has the Kashera, which is from the wrestling tradition and connected to Hanuman. And I don't care if you call me RSS, you could call me all day long. It's connected to Hanuman. It's in the old Rataname. And all the Shastra, the Karash connected to Shivji, and the Kesh connected to Chandi. And because in that worldview, the Khalsa has got a mission even the gods are supporting. Even the gods support it. Even the gods want that Taram. And Maharaj gives the example of where Krishna destroyed Kanchikeshi Pakar Garaya Chandi Divar. And there he Durga Sajake, you forgot even you made Durga. Devta da Nas Karaya. That's a Khalsa's mission. Now we become Devta ourselves. We've fallen them. We become a bunch of Basant ourselves, me the biggest one. And if we're going to change the Panth and make the Maryata what it was, first thing is we need to get rid of the SGPC. Sharomani Gurdwara Prabandhak Committee, Masandadi Mandali, is where the Masand get together in a committee. What Sanskrit term is committee? What Farsi term is committee? What Gurumukhi? There's the word committee coming Guru Granth Sahib. Prabandhak Committee, that tells you all. It's a bloody foreign invention. And it shouldn't be within our Panth. And then that's what the Khalsa is against. And that's the mission of the Khalsa. And so the first part is, what is the Khalsa? Is a Kshatriya. We do not take Guru Granth Sahib the Paul, even though Guru Granth Sahib is present to give us Naam. We take Khande Ka Paul, which means we do Shastra Puja as our initiation. The Khanda is given the sweet nectar to drink. We're doing Is Puja. We are pujing the Khande Ka Paul. We are drinking the nectar of the double-edged sword to be initiated. And so number one, that I'd say the Khalsa has a practical purpose based in mythology of India, in an Indian cosmological view, given in Vachitra Natak. I mean, that's the first part of the question. The next part is about the historical details. Now, we suppose that Sikh writers all competed with each other to write a better account of the Amrit Sanchar because we're egotistical and assume they were the same. No, they were Gurmukhs. And they did Sangat of Brahmgyani. They did Sangat of the Guru. They did Sangat of Bhai Mani Singh. It was Bhai Mani Singh, Senapat. They're in the Guru's retinue. They weren't there to compete with each other. The reason they wrote different accounts is they knew you would read the other accounts and they were bringing to light different details. They weren't opposing each other like us on our posts, arguing with each other online. So we're looking at it different. Let's reassess Sikh history. Sikh history is a continuation of history, and the reason Kavi Santokh Singh writes Surya Prakash is to bring out different details. He's not trying to write what they wrote before. He's trying to bring new information to light, and each writer is trying to bring a new detail which was not in the original one. So that's the number one. Let's look at it in that way instead of like in the way that we're trying to look at it one against the other.
So well, I think what's interesting is Gaur Singh works. Gaushish seems to work off Gaur Singh's work, and they all seem to work off like, as you have with history and historiography, is they all seem to kind of work off the one that comes before them. The details seem to get deeper the more we move away from the event. So, for argument's sake, Gaushish is saying that there's Panchbani are red, whereas Gaur Singh is saying that it just says Bani was red. I'm not sure why it's referring to.
There's more detail.
Yeah, so it seems to be that.
But you see that, my premise, that proves that, doesn't it?
Yeah. So they're not competing with one another. Not the early writings anyway. It's more so the fact that they're just accounting for an event that's happened from whatever perspective they have.
You never hear Ratan Singh or Kavitas Santokh Singh saying, you know, the writer before me got singer, and I'm saying this now.
They work hostile.
We suppose that from our own intellectual ego.
But that's like a modern Western academic.
There you go,
isn't it?
So
Which is
throw
like
that in the bin.
rationality. Yeah,
That's not the way to look at it. And so the first thing is, each writer is trying to bring a different detail about the Amrit Sanchar.
Yeah.
And now this gets complicated now. This is the bit I didn't want to get into, but you forced it, yeah? There was not one Amrit Sanchar. And this is why
There are different.
there's different dates. Because there were a series of Amrits, yeah? And there were a series of events that led up to what we can say is 5 Kakar, 5 Baniya, and the Amrit as we know it, yeah?
Yeah.
So if you-
That's a given. That's a
Yeah.
given.
So if you look at Ratan Singh Pangu and you look at his account of Guru Maharaj and he talks about the Bakri, if you look at it, that account is separate from the other Khalsa account. Why? Because it was a separate account. He's not mad that he puts this somewhere else in the book. That's actually a separate thing that happened at another time. So these different events, the reason people are confused is because between 1666 to 69, maybe even into the next year, like I don't know, because the calendar, I'm not the best.
Yeah. And is that why there's a confusion?
That's a
about it?
confusion as well about the dates, because in India the date goes across the other way, right?
Okay. And
Yeah,
they follow what
Vikram calendar, yeah, because it will go from 1699 to 1700, yeah, and so then our calendar here
doesn't match up. Yeah.
doesn't match up. That's the number one issue. And then the number two issue is you've got, like, say, the first Amrit Sanchar possibly could have been, and I'm clutching at straws here, and I'm being academic, Sangat. I'm not saying this is religious.
Yeah, this isn't necessarily true. We're just elaborating.
We're elaborating. Maybe it could have been like Keep Your Kish, which comes into one of the first Hukamname. Could present yourself in the Sangat with Kish.
Okay.
Then the next
It's
one,
almost like gearing the sun
yeah.
up. Yeah.
Then the next one could be presenting yourself with Kish and a Siddhi Sahib.
Yes.
And so on, and then it builds up to the formalized Amrit Sanchar that we know.
So, because I think then what you've highlighted is that with a modern religious lens, we look at the Amrit Sanchar and Vaisakhi as this huge crescendo, and actually you're saying it's, and to be fair, Godiwala says the same thing in his book. It's this series of, and to be honest, so does Sendapat and a lot of these early writers. They see it as a period of time rather than it all happening just on one day.
Because we're trying to make a McDonald's version.
Yeah. We're trying to basically condense it and
But it happened over a period of time. So it developed, and it happened according to the circumstances. And sorry, I want to interrupt. And it's because one Hukamnama was issued to the Sangat around 1700. I think you've even quoted it, yeah?
Probably.
Which is saying to bear arms and to come to the Guru's presence bearing arms and kish or something like that.
Yeah.
And so there's a period of time where where the Guru is asking for weapons and horses.
It's almost like formalizing.
Formalizing it. And it's happening not in one go.
No.
Because that's what you tell, like, I don't want to sound bad, the Bindu, yeah? Oh,
Well, that's like a nursery level education, whereas we're trying to take it slightly higher and elaborate on it a little bit.
What we do know, it happened at Vaisakhi.
But that's a period, that's like a whole month though.
Yeah. So what we know is that this ceremony
Happened in a month.
happened at Vaisakhi, at a gathering, which possibly was weeks long. That it happened with a Khanda, that the Guru asked for heads, that a rant was given, that Bani was read.
That is given on those dates, like it's read out. Okay.
And a Hukamnama is already issued about how people should come prepared.
Before they even get there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, these are solid things, yeah?
Okay.
Now, what we're discussing is, was there Bakra? Was there Panjvaniya? And all these kind of things. And what I'm saying is, these were put together at different times. That's why Ratan Singh Pangu, Shaheed, Nang Singh, that's why he gives two accounts, because those actually happened at two different times. He wasn't stupid. He was the grandson of a Shaheed Singh.
Yeah.
He knew the Atiyas. And so this happened in a few events, of different levels of rayat given.
It's like, I'm not trying to caricature it or turn it into a silly metaphor, but it's almost like Brexit. It didn't happen over one day. It happened over a period of time.
That's it.
And similarly,
That's it.
this is the community is going through a phase of change, and that change doesn't happen in one.
And the document evidence of the Hukamnami show that development.
Yeah.
And the Atiyas shows that, the narrative show that. So then also the next thing that we need to talk about is also the red, like the Paidiyasing red.
Yeah.
Hardly any copies of it, very hard to date. But in there, there's Panjabaniya plus even more Baniya. Like there's extra Savaiye and there's, more in line with what Buddha Dal.
Well, if Koshish is quoting that Panjbani I read, as in there are a number of references that don't necessarily Panjbani, but they list at least 5, or if not more, 7 in some cases.
Look, you made me remember something important in the Sri Guru Panth Prakash by Ratan Singh Pangu, the exegesis by Baba Santa Singh, which was published by the Buddha Dal.
Yeah.
By I think it was CSJS Amritsar My Seva Bazaar. And in the Katha where Ratan Singh Pangu mentions Jap Jap, like Japji Sahib, Jap Sahib as the Baniya, the modern day Singh Sahib said 2 Baniya was said. But what Baba Santa Singh says there is that means the Panj Baniya, because he's not trying to list them. Yeah.
Oh,
he's not trying to make a complete list how we would want as English educated people.
Religious dogmatism. Yeah.
Right? He just says Jap Jap as in Panj Baniya. Yeah. Baba Santa Singh says that. And I trust Baba Santa Singh's exegesis of that. And you'll find Jap Jap come many times, yeah? Yeah, Apana de Nitanayam Karma, yeah? And so that's an important point. And, also, going back into what you were talking about. I mean, I'm looking at my PhD thesis here and the interconnection between what we're talking about. There's too much for me to remember.
Yeah.
So Kesha Singh Shibbar, in Bansavari Dhamma, he links the creation of the Khalsa with the destruction of the Turks.
Which is what we're discussing.
What we're discussing. And again, from what Bani, the Chope Sahib, which is the 4th Bani, with the quote, Sakal Malesh Karo Ran Kahta, from the Nithanin. So he's connecting here again into this whole warrior thing, this rebellion against the establishment and the establishment of Sikh sovereignty of the Khalsa Raj. And then here again, you've got why I wanted to talk about Bhai Daya Singh is about this whole warrior thread and practical element. So Guru Gobind Singh Maharaj says to Bhai Daya Singh, I myself, Sri Mukhwa, communicated the job and Savaiye for calming the minds of my followers and of nerving them for battle. Again, Khande ki paur, the juice, the essence of the double-edged, the ras of the double-edged sword. And by Daya Singh Ji, if we take him to be the author of this Ratnama, Guru Gobind Singh has dictated this Ratnama to the beloved Panj Pyara. He writes this, he says this, first he should recite the entire Japji from the beginning to end, the Jap from the beginning to the end, the Chope, 2 lots of 5 Sawiyi individually. The opening words are some of those Sawiya. This is my footnote. The opening words are some of the Sawiya. Snava Dina Ki Pratpal, Path to Guru Benastan, Sasadev Sababra. And then the body of Anand Sahib, And so all of those, again, the Dasan Granth Baniya had there, and the Huzur Sahib Sikhs still do those as nippening, And so then that's talking about the Amritsar child. And then again, connected to the Akandi Nahang Singhs, he wears a white kutch and a turban of blue. Faithfully, he repeats both Japji and Jap. He knows by heart Senior Kal Ustad, I don't, and Jabdi Divat, I don't. The hair covering his body he protects, and never will he participate in a charade, to ancestors. He loves the Sri Guru Granth Sahib, which blends the 5 evil impulses. I'm for 5 evil impulses, And then Kaur Singh, going on to 1751, mentions, I think, some of the Ks. Guru Granth, Guru Panth, Teg and Teg, many ideologies, Guru Mantar. He quotes Sanskrit Salok, and he expresses the position of the Khalsa as a third path from Islam and Hinduism, and near identical verses to Ugradanti. And then he talks about that the Guru narrates the Rayat. So some people doubt the Rayatname, but he says in 1751, after hearing the Katha by Mani Singh and penning it, that the Guru expounded the Rayat, obviously by Chaupa Singh, Prahlad Singh or Prahlad Rai, Prem Samara Granth, and others, yeah? And so, again, in Keshar Singh Shibber's 1769, he employs Ugar Granthi all the way through his text. And so, there's a lot going on in here. And Koshish, which you mentioned about Panchagakar, he says a blue dastar, doesn't he? But he says Nidla here, which the Nahangs insist that Nahang Singh should wear a Nili dastar, or what people call nowadays Keshki, yeah?